Well, Hot Springs, it's Big Ben and Company, BB&C, everything sometimes. And today I am going to continue with what I started last week, and will be continuing to rhapsodize about Renaissance women. When I first came on the program, when I first began talking on the radio here, I talked about the Renaissance, which we've all seen occurring around us, with the music festival that is just finale last night with Gustav Mahler's Fifth Symphony, with Suzanne Davidson and Laura Rosenberg presenting that so beautifully, and also the Muses, which will be having their finale today at their auditorium on Orange Street with a cabaret that is also launched and promoted and provided by Tony and Deline Davidson, and that will be a cabaret today, but it's sold out, unfortunately. I'm going to be talking today about more women in history, and one particular woman, Deborah Carroll, who I will have an interview later in the show. But at first, I wanted to talk about the origin of some of the mythology about great women. We've all heard of course, the Amazons, and from the Greek root a, meaning without, and maison, the without, amazo, without breasts. The mythology was that they did either burn off or cut off the right breast so that they could have an easier time pulling a bow all the way back to strike their target and kill and win. Supposedly they were a group of women who our best bet, it was that they were living in an area which is probably the area of Ukraine. I've been in the Ukraine. I've been in Odessa, right on the Black Sea. And I must say, I've seen some of the most beautiful women in the world there. But the Ukraine, that area of the Black Sea, is supposedly where their kingdom was. And they wouldn't allow any men to live there, and they would occasionally, once a year, go and capture men to take them in for breeding. And sometimes they kept men slaves and used them for breeding, but they always either eliminated the male children or sent them home. There's a really remarkable correspondence, but not so savagely fierce today, in a place in northern India. And in the January issue of the National Geographic, in the very back section, the title of the article about this place is called Kingdom of Girls. In the lush jungles of northeast India, hard against the Bangladesh border, in a tiny village with an unconventional social order, Malingnong is where about 500 members of the indigenous Khasi tribe still follow ancient matrilineal traditions, matriarchal, where succession, money, property, and power pass from mother to daughter, where girls literally rule their roosts. And this is a village where all the girls are given educational opportunities, or even sent to the larger cities for even university education, but boys really are second-class citizens. They allow them to live there, but the women own everything, and well, they're in charge. Isn't that interesting to know that there are places? There are some places in the South Sea Islands like this. But we are going to be talking about some of these different individuals today. We're hoping that we can play some music for you from the period of the Renaissance, and hoping to hear some more.
Nature birds that find each other, the birds that find each other, the birds that find each other.
That was some Renaissance music, and I'm talking about Renaissance women. The most powerful influence in the English world was a woman whose name is pronounced Boudica or Boudica. And Boudica, if you ever go to England and you are at Parliament Square, you will see actually the woman in the chariot with two other women on Westminster Bridge, and that is Boudica in her chariot. Also on the old penny is a figure of a woman, the same woman, and this is Britannia. This is her other name, Britannia. And the word Boudica is an ancient Celtic word which actually means victory, or it could be roughly translated as Victoria. The Queen Victoria, of course, was one of the greatest queens, but Boudica was actually a woman who destroyed an entire Roman legion in reprisal for what, well, when her husband died, her husband had given over her care and her children, her daughters, to the ruling consul there at his name was, well, he was ruling in England, and he actually decided to take everything that she owned, and he had her daughters ritually, publicly raped in front of her while she was being beaten almost to death, publicly. That was the Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinius, and he was idiotic to do that because she raised an army of her people, the people of the northernmost region, northeastern region, which we now call Anglia, East Anglia, and Norfolk and Suffolk, area around Cambridgeshire and what's called Newmarket now. That was an area that she ruled. And she went over to destroy the most powerful Roman center at the time, a town, a city called Colchester. The people who followed her were called the Iceni and the Trinovantes, and some of the Britons. She destroyed the entire 9th Legion called Hispania, and then she went down to a place called Londinium and destroyed that and burnt it to the ground. In these battles in which she was fighting, there were 70 to 80,000 Romans and British killed. What really finally beat her was that in open combat, her warriors, whom she led with her long red blondish hair flowing, they were undisciplined, whereas the shield walls, the wedges, the strongly disciplined Roman centurions, the legionnaires, would just march right at these people and cut them to ribbons. And she was finally beaten, and many people say she ritually committed suicide at the age, well, in 60 A.D. In a place called Peckham Rye. I used to live in Peckham Rye. It's in South London. I used to sit in the gardens there, and there was a little statue to Boudica. But anyway, she was quite a woman, and if you go to England, you will see her on the bridge, Westminster Bridge, that is right at Parliament Square, and she has a place of prominence there. Another great English woman, although she was really French in her origins, was Eleanor of Aquitaine. But she became literally the ruling queen of England when her second husband, Henry II, died. She was first of all married to the King of France when she was 15 and he was 17, but he was a bit of a dud. And although she did go on one of the crusades with him, she led the forces. And she had an uncle in Antakya, right on the Syrian border. And many people felt that she was rather too intimate with him, but she then, later, after that dabbling with crusades, she divorced her French husband, although she'd had 2 children with him. She got an annulment from the Pope for the cause of consanguinity. She was actually the 3rd cousin of the King of France. And so on that basis, she was able to have an annulment. And her daughters were not declared illegitimate. Funny way the church was ruling then. Marie of Champagne went on to rule that entire area. That was her daughter. But she married, within a matter of weeks, her other cousin, who was actually her second cousin, who had to do some high finagling financial. Well, he got an annulment from his wedding, so his marriage, so he could marry her, and they were married, and that was Henry II. You may have seen the film. Peter O'Toole played the part of Henry II, and Katharine Hepburn played that marvelous, marvelous part of Eleanor of Aquitaine. In any case, they were married many, many years, and she gave him many children, 4 sons, and she outlived all of them. But the most notable was Richard I, that is, Richard the Lionheart. And Richard the Lionheart was a man that was a great singer, a great warrior. Saladin, the leader of the forces that he opposed in the crusade, the leader of all the Muslim forces, considered him one of the greatest warriors and greatest gentlemen he'd ever met. They carried on a very cordial relationship, even though they were killing thousands of people on either side. By the way, something people don't realize is that Saladin, the greatest general, field marshal of all time of Muslim forces defending, well, his stakes on Jerusalem, was actually an Armenian. Many people don't know that. I'm just letting you in on that. Big Ben and Company happens to know a lot of funny stuff. I was actually out in that area, in the area of eastern Turkey, on the Syrian border, in a place called Adana, Turkey, where we had our forces at Incirlik. We were launching 40 sorties a day. This was 1992. I'm not making this up. Check it out. And I was working with the SEAL team and the Green Berets and the various, Ranger units in the American Special Forces, and with the British Royal Marine Commando, and with the German and the French, to try and provide comfort for the Kurdish people. That was a project in 1992. They'd been driven out by Saddam Hussein, and we were protecting them in a part that was ancient Armenia. Amazing, that ancient kingdom. And of course, there was a genocidal destruction of those people by the Turkish people. Hundreds of them were brutally murdered, and I won't even go into how they were doing it. National Geographic did an article about that. But back to the Holy Crusades, the Crusades by Richard the Lionheart. He was not that successful, and on his return from his last crusade, he was captured and held prisoner in Austria, and it was his mother who then had taken over as then not just regent but Queen of England, who negotiated the payment of his ransom, which was something like 2 times the gross national product of England at the time. It was an enormous amount. But the English people adored him. They just adored him. Again, if and when you go to England, where I lived for many years, many years, from the early 1960s, actually from the late 50s, you will see in front of the Houses of Parliament, in front of the House of Lords and the House of Commons, a man mounted on a horse, raising his sword in the air, and that is Richard I, Richard the Lionhearted. Richard III was a bit of a creep, as you know, and he murdered the 2 little boys that were actually to inherit, but that's another whole story. We won't go into that. I want to get back to Eleanor of Aquitaine because she outlived all of her children. And it's amazing because that is why the British kings, from the time of that, the middle of the 12th century, in other words, from about 1150 until very, very late in English history, believed that France belonged to them. However, remember, 1066, just a few years before, just 100 years before, William the Bastard, William of Normandy, had conquered all of the Anglo-Saxon, well, Harold, his cousin over in England. Well, that was the Battle of Hastings. So anyway, I mean, the Battle of Agincourt, for example, with the great battle against the French was fought to, well, for Henry V to say, no, this is my land, this is English land, this all belongs to England. Well, it only belonged to England because of Eleanor of Aquitaine, some 400 years earlier, several hundred years earlier. She was considered, at that time, the most beautiful woman in the world and the most brilliant. I'm going to play just a little more of the Renaissance music for you. And talk with our Renaissance woman of the day, Deborah Carroll. going to now play a little bit, well, I'm going to read a little bit more about Boudica. Her final battle was fought, and unfortunately to her defeat, but the description of it by Tacitus, the Roman historian, I really, really want you to hear this. Suetonius, that was the Roman general, took a stand at an unidentified location, probably in the West Midlands, somewhere along the Roman road now known as Watling Street. In a defile of wood behind him, his men were heavily outnumbered. The historian said that they were just lined up one deep, but that still would not have extended the whole length of Boudica's line, which now some historians say measured over over 200,000, but this number should be treated with skepticism. Boudica exhorted her troops from her chariot, her daughters beside her. Tacitus gives a short speech, that's the historian, the Roman historian, in which she presents herself not as an aristocrat avenging her lost wealth, but as an ordinary person avenging her lost freedom, her battered body, and the abused chastity of her daughters. She said their cause was just and the deities were on their side. The one legion that had dared to face Boudica had been destroyed. She, a woman, was resolved to win or die, but if the men wanted to live in slavery, that was their choice. However, the lack of maneuverability of the British forces, those are the forces under Boudica, combined with a lack of open field tactics to command these numbers, put them at a disadvantage to the Romans, who were skilled at open combat due to their superior equipment and discipline. Also, the narrowness of the field meant that Boudica could put forth only as many troops as the Romans could at the given time. And so first the Romans stood their ground and used volleys of heavy javelins to kill thousands of Britons who were rushing toward the Roman lines. The Roman soldiers, who had now used up all these javelins, were able to engage Boudica's second wave in an open, in the open, and as the Romans advanced in a wedge formation, the Britons attempted to flee, but were impeded by the presence of their own families, camp followers, who were stationed in a ring of wagons along the edge of the battlefield, and they were slaughtered. So it was a pretty bad situation. Tacitus reports that, according to one report, almost 80 to 100,000 Britons were killed, compared with only 400 Romans. Supposedly, then, Boudica fled to London and to Peckham Rye and killed herself, fell on her sword. The emperor at that time was Nero. Nero replaced the ruling general and consul and sent another legion, as a matter of fact, the legion, the second legion, Augusta it was called, and that was, but he even considered leaving England, Nero, as a result of this conflict with Boudica. This brings us to the Renaissance woman. Well, not a warrior woman. She sent me an email this morning and said, when you sent me the Boudica material, which I did, I wanted her to know what I was doing in the program, and had talked to her about Eleanor of Aquitaine. She said, I've never considered myself a warrior woman. I just try to engage myself in doing what I think is appropriate, and I want you to hear what she has to say about that. I understand you came to Hot Springs what year?
I came over here at the end of '89 to get my art gallery ready to open.
And you had an art gallery here?
At the end of '89 is when I came. And
what was the name of it? Was that
yeah, Contemporania Fine Arts.
Contemporania Fine Arts. And that was on Central?
Yes.
All right. And then you became involved with a man named Benini, is that correct, who was launching the gallery walk?
Benini was really one of the, and his wife Lorraine were the people that came here and really kind of started the arts movement in Hot Springs. And I came over here to help Melinda Hurt Chambliss open her gallery, and that's when the gallery walk started. And I just saw all the excitement and all the acceptance that the artists were getting here in Hot Springs. So I decided, this is the place I want to be.
And that year was?
That was at the end of '89.
Okay. 1989.
Yeah, I'm not that old.
1989.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were involved in what was really now an established practice, the
Yes.
gallery walk.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it was great. In 19 at the end of '89 and 1990, we had 2 gallery walks every month. So it was Friday and Saturday of each month, and you would have 1,000 people come to each gallery walk. It was amazing. You know, at the time there was Melinda Hirsch-Chambliss had her gallery, Benini had his, which his work, you know, mostly featured his own work. And then I had Contemporanea Fine Arts, which was next door to Benini, and then next door to me was the Art Center of Hot Springs. And so, you know, that was the birth of the gallery walks. And what we would do is have a new artist every month. And so we would completely change the gallery. Everything would come down, the new artist would go up. If we were fortunate enough for the artist to come, then we would have him here for the opening, you know, have, you know, wine, food, and art, and meet your best friends. And it was amazing to see how many people got excited about the art. And it was something, you know, entirely new for Hot Springs, not the arts, but to have the gallery walks. So, you know, when you try to prepare yourself to have 1,000 people come in your gallery, it can be quite stressful on occasions and very rewarding.
Well, now, in the year 2016, we still are maintaining this.
Yes. The after a while, it got to be too much trying to do 2 nights every month, so they went ahead and decided to go ahead and do it one night. So, you know, the Friday night gallery walks, and that's what's been carried on now, you know, over 20 years later.
How many galleries are there now? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure how many galleries there are now.
But there are more than 3.
Yes, definitely. You know, so some of the gallery, you know, you have to remember back in '90, there was very little being done on the internet. There was no such thing as cell phones or text messages or, you know, hardly even email. I mean, some people were in, you know, big cities may have been doing all that. But so basically in the early 90s, any art you sold pretty much came in the door, or you called someone to come and look at the art. If you wanted to send them, you know, art to look at, you pretty much had to take a photograph of it and mail it to them.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, we were open 7 days a week from 10 in the morning until 10 at night. And we were very successful. I mean, within just a short amount of time, you know, I was, you know, making enough to pay all the expenses for the gallery just by people, you know, walking in the door. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of the galleries, not only just in Hot Springs, but a lot of the galleries worldwide depend an awful lot on having websites and social media and texting somebody a photograph of a painting and, you know, hey, yeah, I'll take it. And, you know, so a lot of work is done without a person even coming in the gallery.
Well, that's a wonderful observation that there is the facility that we have now through the web and through cell phones and ways of communicating. But I was told by another artist who has a gallery that people are really not buying in the same way as they did before. Younger people are not, but this person was proposing maybe those people who are retired here should be buying art to give to their children and grandchildren to get them interested. When I began to collect my paintings, it was about in that same epoch and before, back in the 60s and 70s, I was able to buy paintings on a time payout basis. For example, if I saw a painting I liked, the gallery would allow me to pay so many dollars per month. Actually, my favorite painting by my favorite artist, Fred Hawks, I paid out over 11 months.
Wow.
And to think now that his work is worth thousands, and that was only a few hundred, but it wasn't the investment. It was just that I have had that painting on my wall for all of these years.
Right.
And it is part of my mind and part of my whole being. And his best paintings, the one he wanted me most to have, is in my bedroom. It's the last thing I see at night and the first thing I see in the morning. And I took one of his paintings and put it on the back of one of my books and had a photograph of me looking at the
Sure.
painting. And that's what I want to get to as well, books. You and books. You're not a bookmaker like a bookie, but you make books. You write books and you produce books and you publish books.
Right.
Can you say something about some of your work in that
Sure.
area?
I think when I first got interested, I've written most of my life, stories. I've been in an ad agency, and
Well, let me just ask that.
yeah.
You were working for an advertising company. That's what is called a copyright editor, and what else?
Well, I
And
was
an art director.
I pretty much had a lot of hats on at, the places that I worked.
But you were writing
yeah,
sort of things that
right.
that are considered ways of enticing people to buy
Sure,
products.
sure. And, so the written word wasn't strange to me. I had always done it. When I moved to Hot Springs in 1990 and opened my art gallery, right across the street from Bathhouse Row, I noticed that there were people, and you have to understand, back in 90, the only thing that was open was the Buck Staff, which has been open since 1912.
The only
And only bathhouse on Bathhouse Row was the Buck
Now, there
Staff.
are several.
And the Fordyce had just been restored to be the visitor center. So people would go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, didn't matter what the weather was. They would go from bathhouse to bathhouse, looking in the windows, jiggling the door handles, trying to get in, trying to see what was in there. So once I realized the fascination with Bathhouse Row, I wanted to get a book about Bathhouse Row to carry in my gallery. It would just make sense. People coming in, they've been over there, it makes sense. So I couldn't find what I was looking for. And I thought, I need to write one. So,
I love it.
yeah, it just,
So
when they
there's
said,
not one available?
yeah,
Make one.
write one,
Yeah.
yes. So, that's a good thing for people to understand that if you can't find what you're looking for, then maybe that's your need to write it.
And your need
Yeah.
to create
Right.
is this need.
Yes.
Go on.
So what I did is I started gathering information about Bathhouse Row, just to understand, so I could talk to people when they came in the gallery, and health reasons. After a little over a year with the gallery, I had to sell the gallery, mainly because the doctor said cut your days, cut your hours, which I was not going to do that with my obligation to the artist. So I thought, okay, I'd sell it, sell the gallery, and this is my time to write this book. So I continued doing research, and again, you have to remember there wasn't really internet availability to research, to find information to put in a book. So I would go to the Garland County Historical Society, I'd go to the Garland County Library here, and over in Little Rock, would go over there to the main Little Rock Library. And I'm talking old school microfiche, sitting at a projector, spinning everything around,
I've been there. I've done that.
and,
in writing my various.
Sure, and you do,
pieces,
sometimes you do, I don't know if it bothered you, but bothering me, sitting in front of that thing and smelling those chemicals, it just
Yes.
really makes you physically ill, but I was determined I was going to do the book. So I went ahead, and being a commercial artist, I understood how to produce a book. So I got a sketchbook and the size I wanted, and figured out how many pages I wanted, and divided it in the chapters.
Type fonts, you
Yeah,
wanted,
and
the
I
font
mean,
style.
So I had just a regular old computer, not what we have now for desktop publishing. And so I would write the stories, the width of the columns that I would be using, and I would paste it in my book, figure out what photos I wanted to use, and I'd go down to the copy place and enlarge them and put them in there. So I created a dummy of exactly what I wanted to do with the book. Because Governor Clinton was soon going to become President Clinton, I had contacted the office to see if I could interest him in doing the foreword for the book.
Bill Clinton?
Bill Clinton.
To write the foreword?
Right. So he did. And,
Wonderful.
while he was still governor.
That's wonderful.
And so I thought, okay, he's going to...
He's a Hot Springs boy.
Yeah, he is. He grew up in Hot Springs.
Very
Yes.
devoted
Yeah.
to
Right.
this town.
And
yes.
he's a favorite son of Arkansas.
Wow.
So I contacted several big publishing houses, and I thought everyone was going to be knocking down the door trying to get in to buy my book because it was about the president's hometown. They all wrote me lovely rejection letters and said that it was too regional. Because if you don't understand the concept,
Too parochial.
I know.
Too.
Yeah. So if you don't understand the concept of our park, our national park in Bathhouse Row, then people outside don't really realize that the people that utilize the baths and have for, since the creation of Bathhouse Row are from all over the world.
Back into the history of the Indian nation.
Right,
Here. It's been a site of healing.
Yes.
It
So
is.
so people from all over the world have utilized the baths,
Well,
not necessarily the people that live here. So, I kind of questioned that, and I thought, well, I'll just do it myself. So I contacted a friend of mine who had the publishing house in Little Rock called August House.
what is it called?
August House.
August.
And Ted Parkhurst, who was a friend of mine, I contacted him and I said, let's do this. And he said, okay, you can use my publishing house to produce it. And I was going to go ahead and, produce the book myself. We're talking having to go to a photography company to have transparencies made and enlargements, because there was nothing that could be done on your own home computer. Everything had to be done professionally. And so when we got around to figuring out what it would cost, and this was, I think, 165 pages, with only maybe 5 color pages, and to do hardcover dust jacket and to print 5,000 of them, was going to cost me $175,000.
Ouch.
Yes, it was a big ouch.
Yeah.
And I said, maybe the world is not needing a Bathhouse Row book. So I put it on the shelf, and it stayed there. Every once in a while I would pull it out and think, I need to do this book.
What year are we talking about now?
On into the 90s. And so finally, I thought, okay, I need to do this. And so I contacted, Clinton was out of office by then and had the Clinton Foundation in New York. So I contacted his office to see if I could get permission to tweak his foreword a little bit, because it said Governor Bill Clinton, which would have dated the book. So I needed it to say President Bill Clinton. And in the foreword originally, he had talked about the juxtaposition of Bathhouse Row and modern society, where you now have the Concord jet, in facsimile machines, and cellular phones. Well, they're cell phones now. They're not cellular phones.
There's no Concord anymore.
People don't use fax machines, and the Concord was parked.
Yeah.
So, I couldn't really use it. So he was very gracious enough to write a new foreword for me to be able to use in the book.
That is.
And yeah, it was amazing, and
So then, did you go to publish? into print?
Yes. Well, there were a few hurdles I had to cross before I could do that.
Oh, hurdles.
Yes, big ones. So I knew that I could, I could produce it myself. So now we're looking at desktop publishing, learning InDesign, which is an Adobe
So,
product.
Who did you go to?
Myself. So then I had the big learning curve of having to learn how to do everything as a desktop publisher. When if I could have cut and paste like I had done for decades, old school, then I would have been able to do it a lot faster. But because I had the learning curve, it took me a while to learn how to do it. So I wanted to do it in the United States, so I found a publishing house that would be able to do it in the United States.
Who was that?
Bookmasters. And so they were able to do it. I designed it, sent everything to them, and had it done. And
What
right
was the
now,
cost, may I ask? Was that formidable?
well, it's not so much just the actual publishing cost. I had to buy all the software, which is thousands of dollars to do the desktop publishing. Many of the images that I had in the original dummy copy of the book had come from the Historical Society. So when I went to get them to put in the book,
You had to get permission.
I was told that at that time they did not allow people to use their images to make profit. So that meant every image, except for maybe exception of a few, every image I had to replace from the original to the final design, which meant I had to go to the National Park Archives. There were several images that I had to buy. There were some of the images from the 1800s that I found where a photographer had come through and photographed the not the bathhouses that are there now, but the ones that were there in the 1800s. So I had to pay them like $400 to use 10 images. So, when you count all the expenses of everything I had to purchase and software and the publishing and shipping for it to come over from a semi-truck, to my storage unit, I probably could have bought a small rent house,
Well, but now, this was then published what year?
2007.
And have you been able to sell?
I've sold, I'm down to a handful.
Well, but you've then published other books using people like Amazon, Create
Right.
Space, and so on.
Yeah, which now you can get print on demand.
This is what I wanted to bring to the attention of my listening audience, that you pulled me out of what I considered the trough of despair when I had been given a contract by my publisher, who published the book that was Roger McGough, the poetry of Roger McGough, and the Liverpool Renaissance, for which I was awarded a doctorate in Cambridge. But that publishing company wanted me to write my memoirs. And when I wrote my memoirs, it was more than they had contracted for. And I didn't know what to do. And I didn't want to have them asking as much money for my book as they had before. Now, that book, the Roger McGough book, they're asking over $230 a piece. That's ridiculous. Only libraries can buy it. It's a research book. And now you said, well, look, why don't you go to Create Space with Amazon? I did, and I now have published over 5 books with them.
Yay!
What had happened was that the memoir they had contracted for me to write was supposed to be 350 pages. I wrote 1,750 pages, and I didn't know what to do. I talked to you, and I talked to one of the directors of my doctorate, who was then editor-in-chief of Carcanet Press, a major press in England. He said, Ben, nobody will touch that book, but if you
Right.
go with Amazon, you will get more of the profits. It won't cost you anything except
Right.
the setting up of it. I've never paid more than now $500 or $400 for any book. And as your husband, Martine, tells me, I pop up on Google everywhere
Right.
because any reference, anything that I've written about is known all over the world.
It's a whole new ball
It's
game.
a whole new world.
Yes, it
and
is.
I want to encourage people, I believe everybody has a book.
They do.
And Will Rogers said, I never met a man I didn't like. Well, I've never met a person who didn't have a story
Right.
to tell. And that's why I'm asking you to encourage, as you encouraged
Right.
me. I mean, before I met you, I really wasn't despairing about that. I didn't want to go with Mellon. Mellon didn't want me to go with him except for 350 pages, and I felt that I hadn't completed it. And you said, no, I'll show you how to publish
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
And you were giving a course at that time, were you not? At the library.
Yes, through the Hot Springs Writers League. And
The Hot Springs Writers League.
right, and they're kind of on hiatus right now because there just wasn't enough people coming to the meetings. But I try to encourage everyone that I talk to.
Well, let's mention some of these. There's the Amazon Create Space.
Right.
There's also a company called Lulu.
Right.
And
The
can you
difference,
think of
the difference between those two. Lulu was out before Create Space,
Yes.
and Lulu, they can do soft cover books, full color. They can also do what they call a case wrap, which is similar to a hardback book, but a case wrap is kind of like what you see children's books. It's the
But what
cover
about the
imprinted in
distribution?
it.
Are they the same as Amazon? Amazon is everywhere.
Amazon is everywhere. No,
And it's
really.
also Kindle.
Right.
And I see mine, I saw mine pop up in a German edition. I couldn't believe
Right.
it.
I know.
My books, Flamenco Fugues, Authenticity, Marcuse Wept, and Duende, the latest, I see there, and it's just amazing. I tell people check out Amazon.
Right.
But then when they see my first book on it, and that's also listed on Amazon for $230.
Right.
Was my last book was $6.50. Now there's a huge difference.
Well,
Right.
I think what happens now is when Amazon first started with Create Space, the only way that anyone could get that book would be the person that wrote it if they put it on Amazon. The author can have as many books as they want it to printed, and then work with the distributor, because you have to have a distributor
But now-
to be able to get in the retail
Now
stores.
it's Amazon.
Yes, so
All
now,
sales. And
yeah,
shipping.
right. So now what has shifted with the whole Amazon Create Space is that resellers, any other person that sells books, can purchase your book through Create Space, and then in turn offer it on their own website, or they can offer it through, if they have a bookstore. So that's how you can get the differences of price. Like my when I did the Bathhouse Row book, I'm the publisher. I created my own publishing company, Matter of Time Publishing. No one could get a book unless it came from my hands. But what happened is, because I had to get a distributor to be able to go in the retail chains, and then once you get a distributor, then they got a percentage, the retailer it went into, they got a percentage. So by the time I went, for instance, a Books A Million, I had to ship from Hot Springs to a warehouse in Atlanta. Books A Million would send the invoice to Atlanta. Then Atlanta would ship them my book.
Yeah.
So I would go in the hole to sell them a book.
But how do you do it now?
Well, now, especially like with Amazon, all these different resellers, which is a little bit different than a retail store, but resellers can sell your book that they can purchase through Create Space at a discounted price.
Well, this is wonderful.
So what has happened is my book that no one should have but me, the Bathhouse Row book, which is the last generation of publishing, some people on Amazon are selling it for $200 and $300.
Well,
And I'm thinking, where did you get that book? You know, unless you bought it and have
Amazing.
held on to it and now you're selling it for that.
So now it's a rare book.
Right, yeah.
Well, that's funny because I became a rare book. Bertrand Rhoda is the major rare book dealers from England. And I had books of poetry that were published, boy, I hope nobody's ageist in the audience, 46 years ago.
Wow.
My first books of poetry. And my students who attended my classes at the University of Arkansas in Benton and Little Rock and at Ouachita Tech and National Park and Pulaski Tech would go on eBay and pay $100 or more for my books. And now my publisher died and his brother found a box of my books, and now I'm selling those for $10 a piece
Wow.
to people that want them.
Right.
But I think it's criminal that people have to, well, not criminal.
Right.
It's just it's too much that
Yeah.
people have to pay that much.
Right.
Because it's a rare, quote unquote, rare book.
Right.
But you and I are rare people.
We are.
What I want to finalize this
Yeah.
thing with and wind it up with is, what is your ideal for, what would you say to the people listening in our radio audience?
Right.
If you have an idea for a book,
Well, let me give you a good example. A lady that I met years ago had posted on Facebook one day her 13-year-old grandson had written his first book.
mhm.
And I said, I want to meet him. So I started mentoring this young man that just graduated from high school and is starting to college next year.
Mhm.
He is a James, Patterson, Stephen King in the making, and not so much what they write about, but he is so prolific. So he sent me his first book that he had written for me to look at, and it would be one of a series of 4. And so I got the manuscript, which he writes longhand. This is the 13-year-old. He writes longhand. His mother would type it, and then she would email me the document. So I went in and I made all the corrections and edited it, and then taught him and his mother how you format a book to go on CreateSpace.
Yeah.
Formatting is the number one important thing,
Well,
because
I have an editor
right.
here who does that for me.
because if you have it in the wrong
Christy
format,
Wilson.
yeah, it doesn't matter how good your content is, if you have it in the wrong format,
It won't.
it screams self-published.
Yeah.
So you have to educate yourself on how to put it in the right
I use a
format.
person here, Christy
Right,
Wilson,
and it
who
makes
I
a
highly
difference.
recommend.
It makes a difference.
Well, I'm going to come back in and make some comments now. We can't finish the rest of that at the moment, because I want to say that any of you who are interested in publishing and getting your work published, you can call me, Ben Wright, 501-463-2733, and I will direct you to people who can show you how to get published. I have an editor that I work with here, and I have published several books. Actually, 4 of them are at the Garland County Library. The one called Flamenco Fugues, the next one, Authenticity, the next one, Marcusa Wept, and the next one, Duende. They're all at the Garland County Library. The only one that's not there is the one that we mentioned that cost, unfortunately, $230 or more, and I'm going to give a copy of that one to the library that I have, so that that's available. That's the poetry of Roger McGough, who's one of the great rock and roll stars in England. Elton John started as a backup singer with him. And it's a subtitle, The Liverpool Renaissance, and a subtitle of that is The History of Rock and Roll. For that I was given a doctorate in Cambridge, England, because it was considered significant, but it's a research book. And that is what is, that's why it received a doctorate. In any case, we're going to be winding up now. I want to mention, I found there's a photograph that I had from a postcard, a woman who was very active in the women's movement, the women's liberation movement. I knew Kathy Woodward, who is Bob Woodward's wife, who was head at the University of California, San Diego, was my close friend. And this woman's name, she was at Brandeis University, Dina Metzger. And it's a photograph of her with her arms outstretched, and she's naked except she shows that she has only one breast. And she made a whole talk about being a warrior woman and being able to go through breast surgery and to be able to eliminate cancer in the body. And all of the money that comes from the purchase of this photograph go to the cancer research groups in the United States. In any case, this is Big Ben and Company, and this is KUHS LP Hot Springs, 97.9.